I'm trapped inside the stomach of a deep-sea monster over 200 meters long, and it's about to crush and digest me alive. At my feet, boiling digestive acid bubbles with white smoke that dissolves flesh and skin. All around, thousands of red muscle fibers on the fleshy walls tighten simultaneously, emitting a terrifying, high-pitched shriek like steel wires about to snap. This colossal creature is beginning to exert force, ready to crush everything it has swallowed: nuclear batteries, human remains, and steel warships, into pulp in one go. The contraction starts from the lowest ring of muscle fibers in the cavity. The muscles go from relaxed to fully compressed in less than a second, each swelling to nearly half its original diameter as it contracts. The tendon fibers stretch to their limit, producing a sound, that sharp, thin screech of a steel cable pulled taut to the point of snapping. It travels through the mixture of water and fluid, penetrates my helmet, and drills into my ears. As one ring of muscles finishes contracting, the ring above follows, then the next and the next, like dominoes cascading upward from the base of the cavity all the way to the top. The surface of the solution pool suddenly surges upward. Everything in the pool, undigested helmets, bones, satellite debris, thousands of larvae, is pressed against the cavity walls by the pressure, stuck fast. The larvae skeletons shatter under the crushing force, their white bone fragments crackling with a sound as dense as stepping on seashells. The liquid continues to rise, reaching 2/3 of the cavity's height, submerging the humanoid structures in the cocoons. The transparent membranes bubble and burst upon contact with the rising solution, their contents spilling out and mixing with the fluid until it's impossible to distinguish what is human and what is liquid. The vibrations reach the wreckage of the destroyer. The steel plates of the pump room begin to shake, and the composite framework of bone and steel emits a layered noise. The dull thuds of metal rivets being pulled out and the crisp cracks of bone splitting, alternating in a chaotic rhythm. The entire pump room shifts, its tilt angle steadily increasing. When I crawled into the pump room, my headlamp swept across the floor. 6 upright human skeletons stood there, each clad in U.S. Navy diving gear. I recognized the helmets, MKV, a model retired 80 years ago. The skeletons were covered in a calcified film, grayish-white in color, with some areas completely ossified into a hard shell. They stood in place, some leaning against the bulkhead, others positioned in the middle of the room, their foot bones resting atop decayed boots with soles still gripping the floor. They stood upon those densely packed holes. A tearing sound comes from behind. I turn to see the charred, scabbed edges of the breach ripping apart. Carbonized tissue is forced open by the pressure inside the cavity, and digestive fluid floods into the pump room, pale, viscous, and dripping from the breach. As it hits the steel floor, a faint white smoke rises, and rust spots immediately form, spreading across the steel in patches as fast as water splashing down. There's a hole in the ceiling of the pump room, 2 meters in diameter, with smooth edges surrounded by layers of bone tissue. Looking up, I see a vertical pipe lined with spaced rings of muscle fibers, each contracting in sequence from bottom to top, squeezing and pushing something upward. These pipes are the upper channels of its digestive system, delivering material to the stomach. The vibrations suddenly intensify. No longer contracting in sequence, the entire cavity wall convulses simultaneously, with thousands of muscle fibers entering a state of extreme compression at once. The entire digestive structure begins to convulse as a whole. The surface of the solution pool at the base of the cavity is violently compressed, and a column of solution erupts through the breach into the pump room with such force that it lifts me off the floor and slams my back against the bulkhead. The column crashes into the ceiling, splattering everywhere, drenching the 6 upright skeletons. The calcified film on the skeleton sizzles upon contact with the solution, emitting dense streams of tiny bubbles. Then the guide rope goes taut. I see it. The rope I tied to the muscle attachment point trembles in the water, tightening until its surface is covered in white stress marks from the sudden strain. The safety pins fly off the grenades, tumbling through the water before disappearing into the mixture of solution and bone fragments. 2 grenades detonate simultaneously. The nuclear battery core wedged between them spirals completely out of control. First, A ball of white light swelled outward from the attachment point of the cavity wall muscle. The light penetrated the muscle layer, pierced through the skeletal mesh, and passed through the secretory membrane, illuminating the entire cross-section of the cavity wall in a translucent pink, making even the fine branching of the vascular network visible. Then, steam bubbles began to expand. The intense heat of the explosion instantly vaporized the surrounding fluid. A massive bubble erupted and violently collapsed inward. The terrifying shockwave blasted the entire liquid surface away, tearing a 40-meter-long gash of flesh and blood vertically through the cavity wall. The tear started from the middle of the cavity, extending upward to the composite structure of the destroyer's keel and bones, and downward to the bottom of the solution pool. The sound reached my ears only then, muffled, like a distant underwater earthquake, followed by a series of structural cracking sounds. The cavity wall tore apart layer by layer, the bone framework disintegrated, and muscle bundles were ripped from their attachment points, each snapping with a wet, crisp sound. The tear spewed out thick, white contents and digestive fluid under high pressure, shooting out of the gash and into the surrounding seawater, where they instantly solidified into floating, thread-like solids upon contact with the cold water, spreading widely through the water. Buoyancy was lost. Most of the fluid had drained, and the pressure difference between the inside and outside of the cavity collapsed completely, causing the entire structure to tumble violently. The over 200-meter-long sack-like body rolled beneath the seabed, crashing into the remnants of the destroyer on the seafloor as it tumbled. Steel plates bent, and beams tore free from the composite framework, flying out one by one. The pump chamber began to disintegrate. The deck plate I was standing on split down the middle, a crack passing right beneath my feet. The steel plates flipped open on either side, and I slid down through the fissure, scrambling to grab onto something. My fingers caught onto a protruding bone beam, and I held on, my body dangling over the gap. The pipe opening was above me. I was in the pump chamber. Below was the now torn cavity, spewing digestive fluid and debris. I kicked, using the bone beam to push myself upward, and crawled into the pipe. The annular muscles in the pipe were still contracting. Out of control, they were contracting indiscriminately, regardless of whether anything was inside. The pipe walls opened and closed, squeezing my sides, my ribs aching with each compression. Every time they tightened, my breath was forced out. When they relaxed, I gasped for air. The pipe ran vertically upward, its walls rough and covered with ossified nodules and secretory pores. I climbed upward, gripping the nodules one by one with my fingers. Another roll struck. The pipe wall jerked violently to the right, and I was flung by inertia to the right side, my shoulder slamming into a bone nodule on the wall. The impact traveled up my collarbone to my cervical spine, wrenching my neck and slamming my head against the opposite wall. Then the pipe wall jerked left, and I was thrown to the left side. Outside the pipe, the entire structure was twisting wildly. With each roll of the cavity, the pipe traced an arc through the water, flinging me from one side of the wall to the other, left, then right. I shielded my helmet with my arms, the knuckles of my gloves already worn through from the impacts. Seawater seeped into the gloves, soaking my fingers in my own blood. My right calf slammed into a protruding bone beam. The impact hit the middle of my shin directly on the tibia. The sound of bone conduction, a sharp crack, traveled up my leg bone, through my skeleton to my skull, and into my inner ear. It sounded so crisp it didn't seem like it could come from my own body. The pain followed the sound, a fraction of a second later, exploding from the fracture point, white hot, surging up the nerves to my knee, hip, and spine. The broken end of the tibia pierced through the skin, the sharp tip of the bone protruding from the fabric of the diving suit. White bone fragments, slanted upward, exposed the marrow cavity, filled with a mix of dark red and gray. Blood gushed from ruptured vessels, mixing with the seawater seeping into the suit and leaking down my pant leg, forming a pinkish mist that trailed behind me in the pipe. Pressure gauge 0. The air tank was empty. The mouthpiece was still in my mouth, but each breath only drew in the residual air in the pipe. The carbon dioxide concentration grew higher with every inhale, while the oxygen in my lungs dwindled. I kept climbing. My fingers dug into the inner wall of the pipe, pulling myself up one bony nodule at a time. My right leg dragged behind, and with each upward movement, the broken leg slammed against the pipe wall. The fractured ends of the bone ground against each other inside the muscle. Scrape, scrape, each friction sending a jolt of pain up my leg. The end of the pipe was outside. A final spasm squeezed me out. The cavity wall muscles convulsed violently, the entire pipe contracting inward before expanding outward. I was ejected from the pipe, opening like toothpaste squeezed from a tube. My body tumbling through the seawater, limbs flailing, the broken tibia swinging freely in the water. Free at last. The fin is still on my left foot, while my right boot is filled with blood. Deep water surrounds me, a murky green, and in the beam of my headlamp, white solid fragments churn. The entire sea has been stained a turbid pale by whatever that structure spewed out. Below, the skeletal structure is still convulsing, a 40-meter-long fissure continuing to spill its contents. White larval carcasses, fragments of human bones, satellite casings, and pieces of membranous tissue drift aimlessly in the water, scattered by chaotic currents. I see the satellite's nuclear battery. It tumbles, short-circuiting repeatedly, blue-white electric arcs flashing in the water. The arcs strike filaments of solidified solution, burning out wisps of acrid smoke that carry particles of charred plastic and organic matter. One arc flashes against a large bone, charring its calcium black.
I'm ascending.
My lungs are about to burst. The remaining compressed air expands violently as the water pressure decreases, pressing relentlessly against my chest. A needle-like pain explodes deep in my joints. Nitrogen in my blood is bubbling, forcibly expanding my cartilage and synovium. The edges of my vision flicker wildly with darkness. My retinas are starved of oxygen. 80 meters. Debris still drifts in the water. A bone floats before my eyes. A human femur, its articular head intact, the femoral neck wrapped in a new layer of translucent cartilage, as if something had recoated it. Carved into the articular head by hand with something like a knife tip are the letters J. S 1943. The surface isn't in sight yet. I look up and see nothing, only the murky green slowly lightening. Inside the decompression chamber, I'm shivering from the cold. The pressure is set to 1/6 of the surface normal, oxygen concentration at 37%, but the temperature control is broken, stuck at 11 degrees Celsius. I lie on an aluminum frame stretcher, the back of my head resting on a rolled-up tactical towel. My right leg is clamped in a splint, the nylon straps cinched tight up to my thigh. The fracture hasn't been surgically set yet. The broken end of my tibia presses against the skin from beneath, visible through the bandage as an abnormal, sunken angle. Swelling has filled out my pants, and dark blood seeps through the outermost elastic bandage, spreading into coin-sized patches. 1, 2, 3. The skin from my left palm to the crook of my elbow has turned pink, unevenly with patches of darker and lighter shades. The epidermis is peeled off entirely, exposing the dermis, which oozes a clear tissue fluid that glistens wetly under the fluorescent lights. My right hand can still move. Clench, release, clench again, release again, the knuckles cracking, but all 5 fingers can touch my palm. My toes, the left ones, inside the combat boot, I try to flex them. Each toe touches the inside of the boot, none missing. The right boot has been cut open, the pant leg sliced above the knee. The fractured area is swollen so taut the skin shines. Leg hairs standing upright on the swollen skin, one by one. There's a smell on me, the stringent scent of iodine, the acrid stench of burnt flesh, the salty, fishy odor of dried seawater, and an indescribable sweetness, like something slowly rotting. When the radiation detector is extended toward me, the probe brushes against the remnants of my wetsuit. The instrument's needle jumps to 12 rem per hour. The surface medic outside the chamber retracts the probe and taps Morse code on the observation window. Da-da-da-dit-dit-dit-dit-dit, Y-O-U-S-A-F-E. Her face is behind the observation window, lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes aren't on me, but on the detector's reading in her hand. The decompression chamber operator passes a transparent sealed bag through the window. Inside is a small memory card recovered from the waterproof case on my gear harness. Scrawled on the bag in black waterproof marker are the words, Seabed sonar playback, awaiting analysis. I hold the bag up to the fluorescent light, flipping it over. The edges of the memory card's metal contacts are embedded with pale gray debris, fine as flour, clinging to the grooves of the copper contacts. The fluorescent lights hum, a high-frequency sound that never stops. I close my eyes. Far below the decompression chamber, deep in the water, something vibrates rhythmically through the steel plating, once every 3 minutes. The frequency of that vibration is exactly the same as what I heard earlier, deep in the stomach of the 400-meter sea monster. My eyes snap open, and I look toward the drainage outlet in the corner of the decompression chamber. Transparent, pungently sweet, viscous fluid is seeping out unnoticed, and on my right leg, already immobilized by the splint, rows of tiny, calcified tooth-like structures are pulsing beneath the skin, pushing their way out from the fractured site.